Strong glory to us for a powerful evening. So, for the past few years, we've been hearing Europe this, Europe that in relation to Ukraine. There's that coalition of the hungry. I mean, those who want to eat. Somewhere over there, Europe wants to get involved in the negotiation process between Ukraine and Russia, while the US has stepped back. But let's take a look at what's really going on there, because right now, a lot of people are saying Europe this, Europe that. But in reality, the situation is somewhat different. First of all, they are indeed getting involved in our negotiation process. For example, Russia has already stated that it doesn't mind the European Union acting as a mediator, despite the fact that, let me remind you, Ushakov, I think he's Putin's special representative, directly sent those very envoys of Monsieur Macron away. But apparently they came back with additional resources and opportunities, and now they want to participate in the negotiation process. Putin wants to see Gerhard Schröder as a negotiator. Sorry, German names are difficult for me. But in the EU, they're considering other candidates and are ready to negotiate with anyone. Although here they are suggesting Merz Portagenos, the president of Finland, and many others. But so far nothing has moved. They're still negotiating over the negotiators, and what's going on with them is unclear. Merz himself says that Russia responds to proposals for negotiations with shelling. They say that Europe is ready to sit down at the negotiating table, but first the fighting must stop. Here the question also arises, well, I mean, naturally, I think most of the viewers of this channel are in favor of peace. But when did the fighting ever stop before some kind of agreement was signed? Usually the sides come to an agreement first and then the fighting stops. Again, this happens because the terms of the peace agreement come into effect. But Portagenos Merz is very powerful here and wants everything to happen first and only then to negotiate. How and why? It's absolutely impossible to understand. In short, he accused Russia of being unwilling to end the war against Ukraine, stating that every proposal for negotiations is met with intensified attacks. And here again, it's worth remembering that now Zelensky is starting to say that we'll strike here and we'll strike there. And by the way, today he announced the possibility of preemptive strikes, for example, against Belarus if something suddenly doesn't please this powerful team from Kyiv. I'm not exaggerating. There will be a video on this topic in the morning. There are some really interesting things I recommend, almost like a preview of the next video in this one. I highly recommend you watch the video about these very threats from Zelensky tomorrow morning. It's just insane, honestly, I didn't expect it. And then there's Merz. Naturally, all of Europe doesn't see what Zelensky is doing, they only see what Putin is doing. Naturally, he's doing bad things. I mean, I'm not downplaying anyone's guilt here. But the fact that one side is being judged and the other isn't looks rather strange. Europe, says Merz, is ready to sit down at the negotiating table. At the table, yes, with Ukraine, with Russia, with the United States. But according to him, hostilities must first be stopped. Russia must be ready for negotiations. For now, Moscow has responded to every proposal for negotiations with even more intense shelling, including of civilian infrastructure. This must stop, says Merz. This is a condition for negotiations to take place at all. And Zelensky, by the way, also recently stated that Europe should be a participant in the negotiation process. Adding Europe to our trio of the swan, the crawfish, and the pike. So initially it was agreed upon, Russia, the US, and Ukraine. Now, if you add one more, nothing gets agreed upon. That is, one side either misunderstands the other or disagrees with it. Now a fourth player is being added, but apparently most likely these very Europeans think that if you add one more piece to this complex composition, then everything will immediately come together. The peace process will be launched, and everything will be wonderful. In my opinion, the more elements there are in a system, the more complex that system becomes. Apparently Portagenos Merz has a slightly different opinion. But it's not for us to judge, we're not politicians. Well, now let's talk, by the way, about where these politicians have already steered things. Nevertheless, there are intensive negotiations in Europe about ways to achieve peace in Ukraine. European countries are actively discussing possible ways to end the war. And Ukraine, well, we all saw those efforts together with Salfetovskaya and Lozovskaya. I mean, Macron was there at the time, I think Stark as well. Merz. And someone else was there too. And they were hiding some kind of napkin. Also with Monsieur Macron in the same train compartment. That was extremely interesting. Of course, there are very intense negotiations going on naturally. While Europe is holding very intense peace negotiations, Europe's economy is falling. That's surprising. That is, they're busy with one thing, but they don't notice anything happening right under their noses. That's how it is. The poem, I think, is English, The Englishman, Mr. Cobb. He walks around with some new telescope, sees mountains and sees ta-ta-ta-ta-ta, but he doesn't see anything that's right under his nose. Well, it's about the same thing. And Brussels has lowered the economic growth forecast for the EU countries and raised expectations for inflation. The main reason cited is the consequences of the new energy shock due to the war in the Middle East, which, by the way, is again actively supported by Germany, and they say, yes, now we'll somehow support Trump. Only Spain refused, and Trump is threatening to do something to Spain, but so far he hasn't done anything. I live in Spain, I'm a Spanish citizen, and so far everything is calm here, so the threats from the dove of peace remain just threats. What's going on with Germany? Well, it's tough over there. In general, it's said that the total gross domestic product of the 27 European Union countries will grow by only 0.1% this year, compared to 1.5% in 2020. This year, they say, the EU economy has faced a new energy shock which is leading to higher production costs and consumer prices, and this in turn is holding back consumption. The profits of many European companies will decrease, while the level of uncertainty remains high. And today I read that, by the way, a lot of companies are closing down. In Europe, for example, a well-known global leader in specialized machinery made an announcement. Whether this company is bankrupt or not, that's one thing, then it closes down and German car factories are at risk of being sold to China. That's the second thing. They're telling us that the German automotive industry is facing a historic decline, but apparently no one is paying attention to this. Those very powerful leaders— I don't know, by the way, how to say powerful in German. Please write it in the comments if you know. Let's call all these wonderful leaders by their proper names. And by the way, they've also shut down. Varta was forced to close a plant in Bulgaria, and in Bavaria, everything is shutting down like this. But we will keep sending billions to Ukraine so that, so that people can make money on weapons, that's clear. Everything else remains very ambiguous. How can Europe claim that Ukraine is a steel porcupine with its quills pointed toward Russia? But for now, it feels like this steel porcupine is curling up into a ball, with its quills turned inward instead of outward, and it looks quite strange. Varta is shutting down. The European Union is preparing new closures of industrial plants and layoffs, because it turns out that this way, gas consumption can be reduced by 15 billion cubic meters. Wonderful. So companies are being shut down in order to reduce gas consumption, so they don't have to buy this gas from Russia, and at the same time, the European economy is shrinking. I'm at a loss for words. Of course, I'm not an economist and I don't really understand all these processes. But logically, all of this seems strange, so everything is being shut down just to save gas. But if we go back to caves, then you can, I guess, heat them with firewood. And another big advantage is that you don't need any industrial production. True, there aren't that many animals, but we'll figure something out. Maybe we'll grow some kind of Paleolithic tomatoes. The European Commission predicts much weaker figures for Germany than for the entire EU. Germany's economic growth this year will be only 0.6% compared to 0.9%. A stabilizing role is played by high government spending on the Bundeswehr and infrastructure. What kind of infrastructure, you may ask? Military. Of course, but the problem with military infrastructure is that it provides only short-term benefits for economic growth. Yes, it creates jobs, it ensures production output, and naturally brings profit to the enterprise, but this is only temporary. This is not something that can be put to use and generate profit. It's not a productive tool. It's not some kind of production infrastructure that allows you to create something new that will serve people. No, these are machines that rust, that depreciate, that are used in war. Again, war has an absolutely negative effect on the economy. You and I understand this, but all these comrades probably don't understand it. On top of that, Brussels is also saying that the energy shock will cool down the European economy and raise inflation to a new level in terms of GDP. You need a subscription here, so we're turning this off, and we turn it on. Something else. Here, I'll find you something interesting. Here you go. So I found out which European economies are growing the fastest in 2026, and I'd like you, dear viewers, to guess which ones are actually growing. Most of you will probably name who? France, Germany, maybe Italy at the very least. Who else could you mention? Well, maybe Switzerland or something. But no, I was just as surprised as you when I saw the real data about who is actually growing and who is actually declining. Take a look at this chart. Cyprus is in first place for growth. Bulgaria is in second place, Spain is in third, and it has never been the richest country. At the bottom of the list, we have Ireland, which has failed in almost everything possible, and Romania. Well, I don't know what kind of industry they have in Romania, but apparently it's not doing very well. Germany is at the bottom, fluctuating with 0.3% growth, and it's clear that this is not the kind of growth that ensures further development. This is most likely inertia. Our locomotive is already running without coal. The firebox has been stolen, or rather, given to those who need it more. Well, and on these crooked rails, this very locomotive is still moving diligently, but it's gradually losing speed, slowing down more and more. When it stops, and especially when, well, you can imagine that it's going slightly downhill. When it starts rolling back, there will be hell to pay for the entire European Union, which for more than 5 years now it feels like has been trying to destroy itself. It's like in some movie, a comedy horror, I forgot what it's called, where they say, and the kids come to us and start killing themselves. Well, that's pretty much what's happening. So it feels like the leaders of some European countries, not all, but some, are like those kids who are killing their own country's economy. Why? Maybe some previous leaders did something to upset them. Maybe they didn't like going to school, or they didn't like college, or they hate industry. But the fact remains, and it's actually Germany that's succeeding in all this. Spain, by the way, is acting very logically right now. There are some problems, of course, but I live in the country, and absolutely logical steps are being taken, except again, I mean, one of the best performing cases in all this is Spain. Cyprus really surprised me, and let's see why it's growing, because here the growth rate in Cyprus is said to be almost 4 times higher than the average in the Eurozone. The reason for the growth is stable private consumption, accelerated investments, offshore accounts, one has to think so, supported by the EU Recovery and Resilience Fund and a record tourist season. Then Bulgaria. Bulgaria is growing because of the euro, which is strange because Bulgaria is not a very rich country, but Spain is leading thanks to tourists. In the rest of the European Union countries, well, it's not exactly total devastation, but it's close to that. And the most interesting thing is that in Europe now, they're gradually starting to change their tone on migration, meaning all these people they brought in by the millions either didn't live up to expectations, or something strange is happening. But it's being said that now there are fewer illegal entries and more returns. Europe is speaking more harshly about migration. At the meeting of interior ministers in Croatia, the formula of recent months was voiced again. Fewer irregular entries, faster procedures, more returns of those who have no right to stay. European Commissioner for Home Affairs and Migration Magnus Brunner stated that the EU is in the final stage of a major reform of the asylum and migration system. They say that external borders should be controlled more strictly. Asylum applications should be processed faster. Protection should go to those who truly deserve it. Well, in short, it's just stating the obvious. It's a repetition of what has basically been said before, but no conclusions are being drawn from what was done before, and deportation, it's true, has increased, but not by much. If you take into account the millions who entered, now only tens of thousands are being deported. Nevertheless, since 2022, the number of new migrants entering EU countries has gradually decreased, from 5.4 million to 4.5 million in 2024. In addition, the number of asylum seekers who were granted protection status has decreased, and this is the lowest level since 2019. The number of deportation orders has increased in EU countries. In 2025, it rose to almost 500,000, but that is truly a significant figure. There are the most migrants from Turkey. Then, for some reason, migrants from Georgia are also being deported. In third place are Syrians with 8,370 people. As far as I remember, it was actually from Syria and those other lovely countries that the most people came. And of course, specialists are valued the least, without a doubt. Builders, scientists, and engineers come from there. That's why they're deported the least. Apparently, that's how it's seen in Europe. And Spain, by the way, issued about 54,000 such orders. Then the Netherlands with a figure of 32,000. So that's the situation we have in Europe. Everything is pretty complicated right now, and there's no end in sight to the economic problems. Again, for some reason now, the concept of industrial development is being replaced by the development of military infrastructure. Although it's long been known that military infrastructure is really just a short-term aid, you could say it's like emergency aid, a defibrillator for the economy. That's it. For example, the same thing happened in Germany in the 1940s. The economy developed primarily because industrial enterprises were producing military equipment. When all of this started to collapse, these enterprises also began to show poor results. At the same time, in Germany, I think they recently shut down the last nuclear power plant, giving preference to green energy. Green energy is, of course, fun and good. But then they start complaining, oh, we have seasonality. Oh, for some reason we generate less energy at night than during the day. Oh, what should we do? But here, by the way, France is doing well. They don't touch their nuclear power plants. They keep operating them. And in some other countries, too, nuclear power plants are being added to the development plans of certain countries again. But all of this is difficult. And as far as we can see, the economy is in trouble. All sorts of things are happening in Europe. But again, they support the war and keep saying, come on, come on, come on, come on. We'll allocate a few more billion. We'll take in a few more 100,000 refugees. And apparently happiness will come. And the Garden of Eden will bloom like it never has before. By the way, write in the comments if you live in Europe. Do you see the standard of living in your country going down, going up, or staying the same? Which country have you been to? Where is it better? Where is it worse? Where is it really terrible? Because, well, my friends from Germany tell me some really bad things about what it's like there. In France, it's so-so. Well, I live in Spain. And again, I'll repeat, here everything is more or less fine. Despite the fact that it's the Sanchez government, which has been heavily criticized. But suddenly he starts making some really logical decisions that actually help development. Well, I don't know anything about countries like Denmark, Sweden, and so on, so write if you have time. It would be great to have a detailed comment. We could make a separate episode just with information from viewers. Well, that's about it. I hope that we will all keep developing and not burn in the fire of nuclear war. On the contrary, not burn, but grow and nurture everything beautiful, good, and eternal. Goodbye, everyone.